Personal power, what does that mean? We'll turn off the music because we don't need that. It's a distraction. But it's something we've been given, right? Just like free will. We have this free will to choose, and the choice we make with that free will is to engage our power, right? What is the saying? You're the captain of your own ship, right? That's the same idea. It's the same idea. We're constantly in different areas of life where things seem like they're out of control, but they're not. One of those quotes that I mentioned by Marcus Aurelius earlier was how he said, "Nothing exterior to your mind can enter should you choose not to let it enter." Right? That's a demonstration of personal power. That's you preventing the exterior from impacting you because you can make that choice. We talked about goals. We talked about our ability to choose to be open-minded, to perceive differently. That's us using our personal power. We have this gift of free will, which is also a gift of using this powerful force. Why would we need free will if we don't have any choices to make from right or wrong, right? We could choose to do right or wrong. That's in our power. Every day when you wake up and you go to work, that's a choice you can make. But you have control over it. You have the ability to choose to partake a certain way or not. And that's important because it goes beyond that. It goes beyond simply making easy, everyday choices. It goes much, much deeper than that. We are able to use this gift of free will to choose right or wrong and to choose how we're going to respond to scenarios, whether it's to engage or not engage. But we have this deep, even bigger gift, and that's to motivate ourselves into action, to acknowledge that things are in our control. How often are we in circumstances where we don't feel like we're in control? I'll guarantee you, even in the most dire circumstances where you don't believe you have control, more control than you believe you have. Even if it's limited, there's still a certain amount of control you can demonstrate, right? Someone give me a bad scenario that they have found themselves in or wouldn't want to be in.
Get hit by a car.
There you go. That's actually a great example because that was the example I initially used. Let's say you get hit by a car. You're like, well, geez, I can't stop someone from hitting me if I don't know they're coming. Maybe they T-boned me, they didn't see them, they came out of nowhere, right? I don't have any control over that. Well, you don't have any control over the fact that they're going to hit you, but you can control a number of other variables. You can control your response to that. You can control the fact that you were wearing a seatbelt and were driving a vehicle with an airbag. Those are things you can control. But we don't think about, huh?
What if you were walking and got hit by a car?
There's still things you could control. Were you wearing a bodysuit? No, I'm just kidding. There's still things you can control, though. Because, yes, you can always practice better safety so that should that circumstance happen, you'll be in a better place when it does happen. And let's say worse comes to worse. You become handicapped. You become so injured, you become handicapped. You still have this choice to forgive, to move on, to not become resentful like Jordan Peterson talked about, right? To not let things own you and trap you down further than you're already trapped down. So you're physically harmed, you're physically limited now, but you still have other choices, thanks to personal power, that you can make. But the problem is, a lot of times we don't realize we have this power. We aren't aware of it. We're not aware that we control a portion of every situation, even the situations that seem completely uncontrollable. So that's where I want to introduce Daniel in, because he has some good stuff to share.
Do you want to talk about free will and how
Nope.
we can benefit? Okay. So I'm going to refine a little bit what Andrew said, touch up a little stuff, dive a little bit deeper into it, especially free will. Get some here. Do you like donuts, Bronson?
Yeah.
Do you? Does this look good? Does this look appetizing? Would you eat it if I gave it to you? You would?
You didn't ask him what kind of donut it was.
What kind? It's a plain donut. Is your mouth savoring for it? Anyways.
I don't think savoring is the word you're looking for. Salivating?
Salivating, savoring. Anyways, so Andrew's talking about self-power, right, and a little bit about free will. Right? We all have self-power. Why is it? Because we have energy in our bodies, right, and you can feel it sometimes. So, for example, when you're sitting down, you're perfectly healthy, or maybe sitting down, laying down, you feel the urge to do something. You feel the urge to be productive with your time. You feel the urge to fulfill, needs of, desire for pleasure or whatever, right? So you feel that self-power. And so we have it. It's in us. And especially as men, we have self-power that, can make us, aggressive for the things we want, can make us ambitious and dream of these big ideas, these big things. I mean, as men, we have different hormones rushing through our bodies, especially testosterone. Compared to women, we have an average of 12 to 17 times, just an average amount of testosterone that women have. And this drives us to be motivated. This drives us to want to win, to want to succeed, and to want to achieve things. And so we have all this potential power here. And this is where free will comes in, right? And what free will is, we have the ability to choose. Unlike an animal, if you put on the ground a nice juicy steak, right, and the animal's starving, and so what's it going to do is, in a safe environment, it's going to eat the steak, right? So if you have a starving human, even, for example, like I just had a donut, if I put a donut there, and you're starving, and it's a safe environment, you're free to go eat the donut, you have the ability to say no. Even though you have the instinct, even though you have the desire to eat the donut, right? You have the ability to say no. And that's where free will comes in. So we have this power, but free will lets us redirect this wherever we want. It helps us make the decision, right? Because that's all self-power is. It's a potential power. Free will is putting that power into action. And that's why it's so important. But if you think about free will, it's like a muscle, right? And we can train it. Because we still feel, just like the animal did, still feel the desire, right? We still feel the hunger to eat that donut, even though we might not want to eat it. Or even though we're on a diet, for example. And so sometimes, that instinct wins against our will. So yes, strengthen your will. As men, strengthen your will. So you have the power to make the decisions that you need to make. Right? Whether if you desire them instinctually or not. So you can stick to your goals, so you can be disciplined. And you can strengthen your will in a lot of ways, right? But through challenges, through training yourself, through fasting, through working on a goal that's, pushes you to the limit. There's a lot of ways to exercise your will. And it's very similar to a muscle in a way that if you don't exercise it, if you rest it, if you don't apply it, if you don't use it, what happens? What happens to your muscle if you don't use it? Exactly, it shrinks, it gets weaker. And so does the will. Because we're faced with all these challenges every single day. We have urges, we have desires. Right? And if we don't use that power of the free will, to say no to those, right? What kind of real power do we have if we don't even have that power over ourselves? Right? What real impact can we have if we can't direct that somewhere else? Direct that positively. And so free will is super important. Now I want to dive a little bit deeper that I don't think anybody usually addresses, but it's a little bit deeper about free will and about, setting yourself up to succeed in goals, achieving goals, or like overcoming, as Fernando talked about, overcoming addictions. Right? Because we use our will a lot when doing that. Because what happens, let's say we set a goal to, work out. And so we're fighting against the urge to, sleep in the morning, or we're fighting against the urge to not train, with effort, not actually put enough work into it. And the same thing with addictions. The will is able to say no to, wanting to have that desire to fulfill that need through an addictive pleasure. And so one concept, we have our tree, it's called leverage on life. I want to talk about leverage on your will. You might ask, what do you mean by leveraging your will, right? So, think about leverage. What does leverage do?
Depending on if the leverage is in your favor, you have an advantage.
Yes, exactly, right? If you use your hand to like unscrew a bolt and then use a wrench, right, for leverage, it's easier, right? And I got this great analogy from this book. This book was about sexual addiction, and it talks about using the will and how we use the will over and over again, not able to succeed or not able to achieve the goal. And so he gives this great analogy, because we do this a lot, right? We're like, okay, let's achieve this goal. I'm gonna stick to this plan, right? I've tried it 10, 20 times and it hasn't worked. I keep failing with my will. So I'm just gonna try it again. And that quote, that really reminds me of that quote that goes,
The definition of insanity
yes, the
is
definition
doing the same
is
thing
doing the
over
same
and
thing
over again and expecting a different result.
correct. Yes. So he talks about it. This is like you entering into a MMA cage, right, against a fully trained MMA fighter without having any experience, and you've lost to him before. And so he just talks about you walking in there and you seeing yourself from the outside and other people watching you, and being like, what are you doing, right? You've already faced this before. You've already gotten beaten several times. Why are you going back into the cage? And now leverage, it's basically asking for help, using leverage, leveraging your will to make the right choice. And there's a couple ways to do that. Do you want to add anything to that?
Not yet. Keep going.
Okay. There's a couple ways to do that and leverage your will. So one way is through your environment. What I also call making the pre-decision, the pre-choice. And so we're affected by everything, right? We're influenced by everything. We have this auto-suggestion, basically, right? If the donut's in front of you, your instincts are suggesting that you eat the donut if you're hungry, right? If it's not there, you didn't even think about it in the first place. So it's creating an environment to succeed. Just how I said before, how you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? I can say the same thing about your environment. Show me your environment, I'll show you your future. How do you set up your environment for success? Right? If you're fighting something, if you want to stick to a workout routine, are you going to create an environment that allows you to do that? Right? Just a couple examples, right? If I'm planning to get up and exercise in the morning, make the pre-decision to get your clothes out the night before. Right? Making a plan the night before. Same thing if I'm trying to stay on a diet. I'm not going to have any auto-suggestions of, the food that I don't want in my diet. I'm going to keep that away. So I'm not subconsciously, my mind being recommended to indulge, right, and cheat on the diet. And so I can plan for those things, right? If not destroy the auto-suggestion, like the donut, then avoid it. Then cover it up, right? We do the same thing for so many other things. Like social media. It's on your phone. It's so accessible. Right? Maybe delete the app. This is a key tip to using leverage to be able to succeed in breaking addictions and creating good habits. And so the second way to leverage your willpower and your free will is to use what I call creating an emotional gain and loss. Essentially, this is changing your story. Kind of like in the overcoming your insecurity, changing the story we tell ourselves.
And it's worth noting that, like Tony Robbins says, people do more to avoid pain than they do to gain pleasure.
Yep. So, for example, use that. use that to get yourself, to leverage yourself to do the right thing. Use pain. What if you can use pain to leverage yourself to do the right thing? And it doesn't have to be true, right? You present this idea, you change your mindset, you change the story you tell yourself about if I succeed this way or whatever, right? What's going to happen? What are the consequences of not doing my goal? To get yourself to do the right thing. You know, if you don't know how to swim and you're thrown into water, you're not thinking about the desire to swim. You're thinking about, staying alive. You're thinking about the fear of drowning. And that's what gets you to swim. So access that by changing the story we tell ourselves. Right? What's going to happen if I don't achieve this? And we can also use desire, right? Like I said, emotional gain, finding emotional gain. And it's different for every one of us. Right? My reason for doing something, my story, I remind myself of, I tell myself of, to do this, pursue this goal, or overcome this addiction might not be the same as yours. Right? So you got to find something that triggers you, that gets you motivated. Right? And it takes time, it takes creativity to actually think of something. But it's worth the time to do that, to leverage your willpower. Because, you know, just using your will, yes, strengthen your will, but also use leverage to get yourself to do the right thing, to get yourself to succeed. Now I finished with the story here.
After
So,
that, I got some.
You got something? Okay. I'm going to finish right after with the story.
Keep going.
You want to keep going on
Yeah.
leverage?
So, you know, here's the thing is, I know you're all smart people because you're all here, so you must be smart. But knowledge is, they say knowledge is potential power. They say knowledge is power, right? But the truth is knowledge is potential power, right? Because if you choose not to use that power, that knowledge, then you have no power. So if you don't take the knowledge you have and put it into action, then you really don't have any power until you act. It's also worth noting, Daniel was talking about environments, right? We create and choose our environments. We have control over that. Sometimes we pretend we don't. Sometimes we don't. If someone hits us and we didn't see them coming, granted, that's an exterior impact, literally, that we can't control. But we can control where we are. We can control the people who are around us. We can control what we do in our spare time, right? Because, you know, we've talked about habits. We've talked about, you know, the choices we make with our free will and how the more we do things, the more it becomes a habit and a way of life for us. There's a couple of small quotes I want to share with you. The first is that choice enables healing. We have personal power. And when we acknowledge we have personal power, we have a choice. If we don't acknowledge our personal power, we take away our options to choose. We give away our power. And what we typically do, you'll see a lot of this if you look around, is we enter a victim mindset and a victim frame. When we pretend we don't have control and we fail to acknowledge our personal power, we become victims, right? But when we acknowledge our personal power, we give ourselves a choice. We give ourselves the ability to choose. And choice enables healing, right? And the truth is, especially with some of the backgrounds that people have, we all need healing in some areas of our lives, right? We all have vices that we need to heal through. You know, and the other thing is, love is a radical possibility of human freedom, right? We have free will, we have freedom. When we acknowledge our personal power, we have choice. So when we have choice, we have this opportunity to spread love and charity, which was virtues that we talked about. And then there's a quote by Dr. Lipton, who I believe is a psychologist, and he says, we are the creators of our life, right? It's such a simple statement, but so powerful. Just like I mentioned, choosing our environments and creating our environments. We create our lives. We think our lives into reality, like we talked about earlier. You control your life more than you think you control your life. The people in the concentration camps in Germany and Auschwitz had more control over their lives than they realized. And that's why a lot of people survived. If you listen to their stories and read their books, many of them took control of what they could take control of in their lives. They took control of their state of mind and helped the people around them, and they made it through it. And that's the reason a lot of people die. I've heard some crazy stories, but that's just a very extreme example that's also very real. Like, even in the darkest places, people who took control of their lives saved their lives. Daniel, you want to finish off?
Yeah. Well, that's a great mention. People control their lives.
We control our lives.
Exactly.
If we choose to.
You control your life. And so we control not the exterior, but the interior, the mind.
Yep. Like Marcus
And so the
Aurelius
same
says.
thing, how to get yourself to motivate yourself, right, is through finding that emotional gain or loss to get yourself to take the next step, to get yourself to pursue the right thing that you want to be pursuing. And so when we start in here, start to fiddle around a little bit, figure out what is going to, how can I put a fire under my own butt to get myself to do the right thing, right? How am I able to get myself, right, make the decision, but get myself to actually commit to the decision? So finishing off with the story, right, this very great story. So there was an island, right, wealthy island, lots of land, and of course there's armies that wanted to conquer the island. And so what happened is kingdoms would send their armies to go and fight whoever's on the island and take it over. So they'd send armies. Send an army, they'd lose. So this army, just like any other army, goes to the island, just like every other army did, right, to fight the same battle that every other army did. And the captain knows that they've been here before. Captain knows that they've fought the same battle, they've lost. There's no difference. And so they dock the boats, they get off the boats, they start to, set up for battle. And his captain gives his men a speech. And he tells them, we've been here before. Countless armies have come to this island and have lost. He said, we're not going to lose. We're going to go home. But in order to go home, we're going to go home on the enemy ships. So we're going to have to go home on the enemy ships. So we're going to have to win. The only way for us to go home is to succeed. So what he does is he tells his men, burn our ships. And his men burn their ships. So what happened was now there was they put themselves in a situation where it was succeed or fail, sink or swim.
There's no
They
back
were
door.
motivated to win. So that's what happened, was they ended up taking over the island and going back home on their enemy ships.